Hopefully replacing this is fairly simple. It is located right underneath your VRO pump on the VRO pump bracket. So hopefully it's just removing some fuel lines and oil lines to get access to this, and then simply removing it and reinstalling it and good to go. Hopefully I don't have to mess much with the VRO pump. I hope that is not the case, but stay tuned and we'll work through it step by step. Okay, this is the port side of the motor, and here is the VRO pump. The sensor is right here. You can see there the part number 437808, kind of covered in oil. Hopefully all we have to do is remove these fuel lines here, fuel and oil lines here, remove this cover, kind of push back the wires, and do a quick swap. First thing I'm going to do is remove this cover, because I can already tell that I'm going to need that space clamp. Make sure to be really careful when you're removing these screws. I have dropped them down into the lower cowling, and it's pain to retrieve them. Okay, the next thing I'm going to start removing these hoses. Now, it's always whenever you have a situation like this where you got a bunch of hoses, that you remember what hose goes where. If the hoses are a bunch of different diameters, then it's fairly straightforward. But just make note, take a picture with your phone so that you can look back on it later if you get confused, etc. It may be somewhat hard to see, but if you follow the screwdriver tip, there is a small hex head back here that holds this bracket, this metal bracket that pushes the sensor into this main VRO bracket. So we have to remove this hex head screw to remove the bracket that is clamping the sensor to the main bracket. So from what it appears, there is one hex head screw that if you look at this connector and this connector, you got to slide it right back in between these two corners to get to that. The frustrating thing is there looks to be like a little bracket that's in the way of the head back there. Again, it might be hard to see, but you might have to get a little creative on how you remove that without removing this whole assembly here. So I finally got it. It just takes a little bit of patience. That tab back there, that it may not be an interference for you, but for me it was. You just kind of have to take a screwdriver. You have to take a screwdriver and gently slide it in there, kind of twist to pry it back, and then slide your long, extended socket and extension over it quickly. Just be patient and you'll get it. It ended up being a metric number 8 size head. I have a feeling getting it out will be a lot easier than getting it back in. So once it's free, I would tilt up your socket, and this is probably why it's paramount to have a deep well socket so it can slide in there like that. So you can slide it in. Once you get it out, you can get it out that way. But be careful and don't lose the screw. Now the sensor, well, the bracket should come out first, right? And then the sensor. Keep in mind the sensor's still tied in to its fuel line connection. Here you can see where it's still connected. So gently take your pliers, slide that back, And pull out your electrical connection right here. Everything's kind of up in your face, I realize. Actually, just pull this connector here, just pull the two tabs on either side at the same time with your fingers, slide it out. The bracket comes over that. Next thing we do is gently get the fuel line off the switch. If it's been on there a while, it may be somewhat difficult, so try twisting the sensor to kind of breaking the stiction and pulling while twisting. And there it comes. Before reassembly here, make sure that you put the bracket on first. See how it slides over, and then put the connector on. And it is keyed. Next, we want to reconnect our line to the T, the fuel pump T. Make sure that's on there good. Snug. And now for the fun part. So make sure you pay attention to the orientation of that bracket, because I got it wrong. So it needs to go in an orientation like that. Alright, so here's where I'm getting a little creative. Got a paper towel and I wadded it up, and I've pushed it in there so I can get a little resistance, right, so it doesn't just slide in there, but I can keep it safe. And now what I have to do is I have to get this thing started without dropping it down, right, which may prove to be tricky. So I moved some connectors out of the way so you can see what I'm talking about here now, with that bracket, that plastic bracket back there being in the way of that bolt head. So yeah, remove some of these connectors and you can see it and get access to it a lot easier. Don't over torque it. Just get it good and tight. I'll just hook everything back up the way you had it. So before I put this plate back on, I'm going to go up front. And we're going to verify that nothing funny happens whenever we just turn the key on. So that's a good sign. If there was something wrong, the check engine light would have, once they all turned off, it would have popped back on. So at least there's nothing initially wrong with what we've done. As you can see, it's raining outside, so I can't test it out at the moment, but when I can, I'm gonna crank it up on some water muffs and check it out. Something pretty interesting is you can see here on the old sensor, there's a lot of cracks where the wires go in at the potting compound. A lot of cracks. So I don't know, maybe that's a good sign that it was going bad. Maybe that's why the alarm came off whenever I hit choppy water, is this connector was bouncing up and down and it didn't have the strain relief it needed anymore and causing an intermittent failure. Anyways, something of note. Alright, so it's a couple of days later. I took off early from work. I'm gonna go check out the fix that I did and make sure that my engine's still running good. So you can see it's running. No check engine light. And let's see how she does. What would happen before is, I think because the sensor was bad, maybe as a diaphragm it would knock around, but if I ever hit a little chop, man, it would throw that alarm. It's not doing it, which is a good sign. So I ran from, you can see off in the distance, the Decatur Bridge. That's the 65 bridge. So I've probably run a couple of miles and no alarm. This is easily long enough for it to throw an alarm. We're gonna crank it up. Goes through its checks, cranks right up, and I head on back.